I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. You and I spoke on a TikTok live. I think it was a year ago. That's how
Yeah, it was
fast,
a while back.
yeah, that time is flying here. But I've always been so interested in your content, your message. You and your husband have such a knack for this. The way that you speak and storytell and educate, I've learned so much. I've kept up on the whole college degree free way through you and everything with college through your social media platforms. I probably see you on my For You page every other day, if not every day, with constant education. So I want to thank you for that. Um, and you have a book or a workbook, two workbooks, The Degree Free Way. And I would just love to start this episode off because we're going to talk everything college, going to college, not going to college, interest rates, the do's, the don'ts. You're the person to talk to. But I want to start it off with your book and how you and Ryan are really adamant about educating people that there is another way to success outside of college. So can you give everyone just a little background on you and Ryan, what made you so passionate about the degree-free way? And we can just start there before we get into all the juicy questions.
Absolutely. And I wanted to basically right back at you. I see you on my For You page also every other day. So I consume a lot of your content and I have learned a lot from you and your style as well. And so the feeling is very much mutual.
Awesome. Well, I
And
appreciate that. So we got to stick together. I feel like there's a bunch of us, doing the work here and educating people on different stuff. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think too, it's part of this is a little bit of an aside, but we're entering a new age, I think, of scholarship in a way, because one of the things I've noticed, especially on TikTok and with a lot of different short form content, and this is an aside from college, but is the ability and accessibility of information now. You can be an expert about any one topic. There are people, and when you look at short form content creators like you are a great example of this, where when I think about housing and anything about economic policy that's going on, I tend to think of you as one of the foremost thinkers that I look to see, okay, what does Freddie say about that? What have I seen from him recently? And so it's almost like we have all these extreme subject matter experts in very specific, and you have a thesis. You have a thesis. You have one
Yeah.
thing that you study, one thing that you care about, and one thing that you know a lot about. And that is kind of how I feel about this subject, which is where all of my passion, my interest in it came about. And then Ryan and I have been entrepreneurs for a long time. And so, the big bridge for most people, and this is something young people face as well, is how do I turn something I care about, the big hairy problem I care about in the world, how do I solve that? And how do I get paid to solve that? And degree free is basically the answer to that, because it's very similar to how somebody who is pursuing a PhD, how they are trying to fund some way for them to continue to learn and problem solve about the one thing that they see as the most interesting thing in the world to them. And so that's kind of how I view this new age of entrepreneurship, this new age of information and learning and education in general. But degree free, specifically the degree free way, was born from personal experience. And that is mine, personal experience largely, but also Ryan's. So the book is kind of interesting in that it's two books. And so it's a parent copy and a young adult copy. But basically, we write it from two different perspectives. So I write from mine and Ryan writes from his, because we both arrived to the same conclusion from opposite sides of the coin. So I'm degree free. Ryan has an economics degree, and we laugh a lot and we call it the communications of math, but that's what he did in college. And he and I both had similar high school experiences in that he graduated early and then immediately went to college. And I actually graduated in Georgia, where I grew up. You're able to dual enroll. And so I was actually able to I was in a lot of AP classes, so I clept a lot of classes out. I had a lot of credits. And so I was actually fully enrolled at a local university when I had just turned 17. And so I did go to college. I went. I saw what was there. I was not impressed and
Yeah.
and I was paying a lot to be there. And so for me, where the rubber really met the road was I'm in college and I'm sitting on a college campus and I'm learning. I was taking, English. When I finally broke out, I think I finished 3 years of college English. So I would have been a junior, but I
Yeah.
was, normal pace on everything else. But I had an economics professor who did not like me for for whatever reason. Maybe asked too many questions. And she gave us an opinion piece while I was at school. And then she gave me a bad grade on this opinion piece because she didn't like my opinion. Not
That's
because there was
wild.
grammatical errors with my paper, not because there was anything factually wrong with it, but just because she didn't like it. And that to me, I just couldn't quite, I couldn't understand. I just went, what? You know, because I went afterwards and I talked to her and I
Yeah.
just said, what? Why, what's wrong with it? And she said, nothing's wrong with it. I just don't like what you said. And it was the craziest experience for me. And it just
I
shattered the glass, you know? And I just went, okay, well, if this is higher learning and I don't feel like I'm learning anything and I don't see the professional application of any of this, why am I here? What am I doing here? And I asked the question that a lot of young people ask, which is, what am I doing? What am I going to do with this? And I was going for journalism because that's what all girls my age were going for at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, the marine biologists were right before me, and the psychologists were right after me. And so I I remember sitting down for a sociology final or midterm, and I just couldn't sit there one more second. And so I tore up my sociology final and I threw it in the trash and I left.
Yep.
My favorite part of that story is that I stole a book of Longfellow poetry from the library because I felt like I wanted to have some sort of learning that I got from this experience. I did pay for the book, so I'm not a
Okay.
criminal
Yeah.
anymore. Um, but, and so that led me down a path that was not intentional, but ended up informing my experience. And that was I worked a ton of jobs. I worked a bunch of different jobs. I worked on a dolphin boat. I was a bartender for years. I worked in fine dining serving. I became a lifeguard. I moved to Hawaii, and that's actually where I met Ryan. But I worked at an MMA gym that BJ Penn owned, actually, like just
Oh,
a bunch
okay.
of
Yeah.
a bunch of random jobs. And I ended up working in tourism sales. And this was fast forward quite a bit of time. And then I ended up realizing, oh no, I'm going to lose my job because COVID shut down all of the Hawaiian Islands, right? No tourism, no money. A ton of people got laid off. It was devastating, truthfully, to the economy there. And still to this day, a lot of people are really struggling because of that. And I just went, oh, I'm not going to be able to get any of those jobs. There's no service jobs, which I had always worked. There's no tourism jobs, which is what I was working in. And I just went, shoot, I need to I need to be able to make money somehow, right?
Yeah.
And so I went and I retooled my entire skill set in 45 days. I went and I found a tech job and I was like, I'm going to apply for this job. I'm going to go get a certification. The certification cost me $362. I am not incredibly bright. I'm not a great, I've never, was never like a really good student, but I just studied. I just studied. I did flashcards. I learned vocabulary. I learned structure. And I took this test and I passed it. And then within 45 days, I had been employed in a 4-day work week remote tech job that said it required an advanced computer science degree. And that kind of just cemented for me something that I had been suspecting, which is that degree requirements are not real unless they are legally required. And
Yeah.
then I just replicated that with a lot of other people and then built a framework around it. And then that's how we started teaching young adults and started teaching their parents. And so it's a long story, but that's the reason.
But that makes sense, and it's really interesting how you took a perspective because you were in college and you actually didn't even really like the experience of college itself, which is super interesting because I do hear people on TikTok talk about how they in that realm that they don't really feel like they're learning that much. Other people do, and I think my biggest beef with it is the cost. So it's interesting to hear that that's kind of a double-edged sword. That's not only do a lot of people maybe not get what they want out of it, but they're paying tens of thousands of dollars. And here you are in 45 days. Is that what it was? 45 days to get a
Mm-hmm.
certification and then to get a job? I just think it's brilliant because I think one of the hardest things, and you probably heard this growing up, where millennials, probably Gen Zers, never had a narrative shoved down their throat more than you got to go to college. And I know that's how I felt in the early 2000s between the guidance counselors, principals, teachers, all my friends' parents. Luckily, my parents were super cool. They were like, my son will never go to college. I just know that. So they didn't pressure me. But it was kind of like all of my friends' parents and everyone was like, if you don't go to college, I mean, how are you going to succeed? You're just going to be some loser, basically. Like that's how it felt for a
Yeah.
lot of millennials, and I think that narrative stuck for many years. Where people ask, "Well, then how do I get rich or how do I become successful without a college degree?" What do you think started that? Because I don't think there was as much beef in the 70s, 80s, and 90s because it was actually affordable. Do you, I guess a two-part question. Do you think
Hmm.
that college was effective and efficient maybe in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and there was a change? So why do you think that change happened? And why do you think it was just, you gotta go or you're not gonna win? Like, what happened?
So you've probably seen me talk about this on TikTok, but this is where I love to get into this, which is this, it reminds me a lot of what you talk about, which is all of the housing stuff, all of the Big Short lore, as it were, all of the stuff that came out of that, all the resulting economic policy. But really the root of this problem, and this is what nobody talks about, is that our culture is all downstream, especially when you talk about policy, right? Policy is just incentives. And so when you make policy, you change incentives. And when the government makes policy, they do it in an artificial way, because if the government is having to make policy, it's not people's natural behavior. And so the consequences will always be unintended. That's just how economics that's just how economics works. I didn't learn that in college, by the way. I learned that from just reading books. And so when you put artificial incentives in place, you get all these unnatural results. And so our culture and our culture around college right now is very much unnatural. What's interesting about it too is that, and I'll get to this later, but you'll see in other countries right now, they copied our system and now they're having the same problems. China has our problems. India has our problems. Korea has our problems. Same problems. And Korea, I just saw removing 2 days ago, removing bachelor's degree requirements from their national certification exams. Why? Because it's ruining everything. It's ruining their economy. It's ruining their job prospects. It's doing the exact same thing that it's doing here, which is people are using their money and they're buying degrees and then they're not able to buy housing and they're not able to buy other things because you have only so many middle class people only have so many $100,000 bullets that they can shoot in their life. And so to go back to the beginning though, I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, just real quick. So you think the major change that we're having with companies not requiring degrees anymore is because they're almost in a weird way trying to pull back that narrative of, hey, actually you don't need a degree for this job to make to so that
Hmm.
people don't take that $100,000 bullet? Is that
Yes.
basically the thinking?
So a couple things happened at the same time that obscured what was going on. And there's and actually you could probably say that for every giant every giant economic flaw that we see now, are things where we see just the market doesn't seem just, and you can always trace it back to some artificial either judicial ruling or legislative ruling that they shouldn't have done, and that it may have had good intentions to begin with, but in fact is always the wrong thing to do, because again, you create unintended problems. So you're trying to solve a problem that usually isn't that big of a problem, or it seems like a big problem, then you make and create much worse ones. And so basically, what happened was in 1965, the Higher Education Act was formed. Okay, at this point, only 7.4% of all of the jobs in our country required college degrees. Those jobs were all people who were in engineering, they were architects, they were physicians, they were things like that. And so that's who was going to college. Also, if you think about who was going to college in 1965, it was all of the GIs that had just come back from World War II. And so they have a very different demographic in that they weren't these children that we were sending into bankruptcy exempt student loan debt at 17 18 with no life experience. These were men who had come back from hardened combat, and they were so glad to be able to sit in a calm environment and then go get something that would guarantee them a license professionally to get into some high earning profession. It's a very different result you're going to get from sending a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds to be around a bunch of other 17 and 18-year-olds who are drinking and sleeping around and doing whatever, which is just the culture of the American college campus. And now, and I say that because you can look up and see those are the behaviors that people engage in on college campuses. It's just what they do. And like, right or wrong,
Yeah.
that's just how it is. And so in 1965, they went, oh, okay, well, we've got all these people in college, and the colleges loved this inflow of money because they were getting the GI Bill, right? Colleges were like, oh, wow, wait a minute. We can sell degrees to the middle class. How great would that be? And then some things happened, and we had the Higher Education Act of 1965. Now, when this happened, in the period of time between 1965 and 1976, the amount of people going to college in our country, it 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 massively increased. It massively increased. You had now 7.4% of the population having college degrees, an almost equal match with how many jobs required degrees, to by 1976, 13.8% of the population had college degrees. It doubled. It almost doubled in 10 years.
Yeah.
That's not the only thing that happened. The default rate in 1965 was 2%. By 1976, it was 9%. It had gone up crazy because people were buying degrees they didn't need because of economic incentive. Because the colleges were like, how fast can we invent degree programs to sell all these people? And it wasn't necessarily to meet a need in the market, it was to meet a need of consumers that did not have a market application. Yeah. Now, the craziest part of this, Freddie, is that if you fast forward to now, do you know what the default rate on student loans is now?
Lay it on me. What is it?
2%. Artificially, because in 1976, they amended the Higher Education Act to make it so that student loans were not bankruptcy exempt. It only took 10 years for them to have to do that because it was so bad. The entire system in 1976 was about to collapse. So the last time that I believe a college degree had positive ROI for most of the people who bought it was probably the mid 1980s.
Oh my, this story, the reason I can't even wrap my head around is the more I look into economic policies from the 70s and 80s, it's the same story. It started off as such a good idea, and then you see it just actually go to shit over 40 years, and now we're dealing with those repercussions. And was the I think I've done research on this a little bit. Were the degrees, though, obviously in the 70s and 80s, it was very cheap to go to school. And then if you did invest in school, didn't you get a higher paying job than if you didn't? Was it justified? Like if you spent $5,000, but you would get a $35,000 job, where today it seems like you're spending $120,000 and you're starting off at a $58,000 job, which is backwards. What's the data on that? Do you know for the 70s and 80s, like did that work better before it started going downhill?
So I don't know. I don't know the data on that exactly. I do have a theory. My theory is that the economy at that point was booming. It was all this. So it was difficult to assess whether or not it was actually the degrees or whether or not companies just started hiring people that had them because it was an easy market. Because they went, oh, well, because it was kind of a tailwind, right? The guys that they had gotten, and I say guys like people, whoever had gone to college who needed a college degree, and the guys that they had hired that had college degrees at the time, like, again, they were grown. They were adults. They weren't children like the way we have children now going to college, and they had real life experiences. So they had good outcomes hiring them. They said, oh, well, maybe it's the degrees, but it wasn't the degrees. It was actually the people who had been buying them at the time they were buying them. And so and then it became almost a tailwind thing where now you're hiring people and you're adding degree requirements to your job listings when it's not the degree, it was the people who had bought them in the period of time. It's like every rolling 10 years, the culture of the people who had bought them and the values of those people had changed. And when I say the values, I just mean like they were grown, they were grown adults with families, and they went, I'm going to get this so I can become specifically this and have a license to do this job that's high earning. Whereas now we just go, we buy them, and then there's no end application. If you ask the average college freshman, what job are you going to get with your degree? They have no idea. They have no clue. These people were only going if they knew what job they were going to get.
And that makes sense. That seems like that's how it would work. Because even today,
and that's how it
I
should
think,
work.
Yeah, that's another issue that I have when I think about it, especially those of us who are older. I mean, even if you're 25, 35, 45, at 17, who was that? I guess that was me. I don't know. I'm so different, and they're making these big decisions. Do you see a version of this where, or maybe you give this advice where, hey, why don't you go live your life? Because we're living longer, technology, everything's happening. Like, why not go live your life after high school for 7 years? And if you want to buy a degree at 26 years old and graduate at 31, you still got your whole life. Why are you going at 18?
That is so, yes. Yes. Because if you think about it, and this is why is the ultimate question, right? Why do they have to do it right after they graduate high school? Why? And if you stop any parent and you go, why do they have to do it right then? They get uncomfortable because they go, there's not a reason. There's not a reason, and they know there's not. It all becomes social conditioning and just this pre-checked box that's just there. And they just go, well, that's just what they do. And now you see how secure this $848 billion industry is because they've put so much money into the marketing and they've just gone, we've got these people. They'll just do it. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they think the degree is responsible for things that the degree is not responsible for. And it really comes down to the fact that, and this is where it gets people don't like to have this conversation, but truthfully, colleges screen for people from a certain socioeconomic bracket. And when I say that out loud, everybody goes, "Yeah, of course they do." Right? I just saw an article about Harvard saying that they'll make tuition free for families that go to Harvard whose household income is less than $200,000. And I just tweeted, "Great, they're going to take 3 students," because Harvard doesn't accept students who don't come from a certain level of income. They just don't. And the thing is too, buying a degree from Harvard is not going to increase how well they do in their life if it's not something that leads to professional licensure. Less than 1% of students who go into Harvard that are poor will end up getting out of poverty. It does not do anything. And it's because and this is where spending all that time and money probably keeps them there, quite literally. Even if they're not paying, they're still paying to live on campus. And this is where people don't want to have this conversation, but it desperately needs to be had, because so many people, and I see this all the time. I just saw a comment on one of my TikToks the other day that said, well, rich people buy their kids college degrees. I'm like, okay, are you rich? Are you going to buy your kid a Ferrari just because somebody's trust fund kid has a Ferrari? That's insane. How is that going to, how you don't have the money to do that? And so when you do that, it is not going to make your kid rich. It is going to make you and your child both poor. And that is the thing that really, like, nobody wants to talk about that, because colleges have done such a good job marketing that college is education, like capital E, when education is not college, capital C. Education is something that anybody can have, and it's accessible to everyone. It's accessible to anybody that can read, I believe. That's how I feel. And you see people that have just gone, oh, well, I need to be educated. I'm like, you can be educated. Not buying a college degree doesn't make you uneducated. It means that you don't have a paper from a college, and that's fine. Like, and we live in this day and age too, where you could look around and you can't look at titans of industry these days without seeing one that didn't buy a college degree. You look at Palmer Luckey is the front of like robotics and warfare and all of this crazy biomechanical engineering. 0 degrees. Guy's got 0 paper. 0. Yeah. Sam Altman, and I'm not saying that these are such great people. All I'm saying is that you can't deny that they're the great scientific minds of our age. And you look around and none of them had time to finish college. It wasn't a good use of their time, money, or effort. And that's what parents need to understand, is that just because it's college doesn't mean it's the right decision.
I mean, I think that's the message, though, is even hearing you say all of this, even in my mind, I go, I understand where you're coming from, but even I've been conditioned where if I meet someone, I go, oh, you graduated from Harvard? You must be like, how are you, sir?
Yep.
That's
how are you, sir?
Yeah. How
so
are you,
funny.
sir? I instantly, I stand up straight.
Yeah.
How are you, sir? Are you a doctor? Oh,
yeah.
But you also just believe that again, Harvard, prestigious, they must have a network of people. They must be important. And and I think I've even heard people say that they need to keep that prestige because all the people who have been riding that wave of being at Harvard, they want to make sure that Harvard name stays prestigious, because if it crumbles, then so does that prestige for the alumni, if you will. So they got to keep that going. But I think that's what I love most about your message, though. And I'm always clear when I make my videos. I don't necessarily blanket statement think that no one should go to college. I believe that some people should, but the numbers for me is what bothers me more than anything. Yeah. Is the cost and not having those 5 or 6 years of work to figure out who you are, what you want to do, and the debt's just getting huge. And I think that's what I want to chat with you about too, is if we can move into the loan aspect for those who are getting loans. How would you sit down with a teenager, or how do you, and try to explain to them, you're going to take out this loan. This is the interest rate. This is the difference between federal and private, or even mom or dad or whoever going, I'm going to mortgage my house. And I'm going to take out, that's a different kind of loan. But I'm saying, how do you explain the loan and the interest for young people to consider that it's not just like, oh, you pay 500 a month and in 20 years it'll be paid. Yeah, no big deal. You'll get a good paying job. It's all about the experience, Hannah. It's all about the experience. 500 a month, that's nothing. You're going to get a high paying job. Like, how do you break that
Well,
down?
so like you were saying earlier, and where I got a little off track was that I am of the opinion nobody should be allowed to take out student loans until they're 25 years old. I think if they did at 25 years old, when their brain's fully formed, with having had to go into the workforce in some way, one, most people, 80% at least, I think, would find that they don't need degrees at all to do exactly what they want, to make high pay, to work in tech, to build their businesses, to do whatever. We would stop kneecapping all of the entrepreneurs who are now missing from our economy because, again, they spent their $100,000 bullet on a paper instead of on capital for their business, or a $50,000 loan for their business, or even cash flowing buying a local business. And then I also think that it is very rare, because I work with this age range. I think it's very rare you're going to find, and this I think is why colleges target this group. It's very rare to find a young adult who understands really how much money it's going to be. I think it's really difficult to do that. And I think, frankly, even more than that, it's rare to find a parent who realizes that the money is not going to get made back. And that's where you probably see what I see, which is right. Like, there's parents that, and I've seen and heard stories of parents like HELOCs on their houses, they're liquidating retirement accounts, they're taking second jobs when they're 55 years old. And it's because they're having to pay for their kids' college. And now, and I see this as like very similar to the 2008 housing crisis, like a tidal wave that's coming. Because I'm like, okay, well, if all these kids are locked up in student loan debt and their parents are now like double strapped and their grandparents are tapped out too, one of the biggest groups that's taken out student loans is actually grandparents, because they've tapped the parents out, they've tapped the kids out, and they're going back for the grandparents. So you've got multiple loans and you got multiple generations mortgaged to these papers that have negative ROI for a lot of them. And we're completely unnecessary, and we're taken out far too early, with no clear application, which is also my problem. I don't think nobody should go to college. I think that probably less than 10% of people should go. And I think that they should only do it when they're 25 and they have a clear reason and application why. That's it. Or they have the money because they just want to go, and that's how they want to learn. That's the educational product they want to learn for the love of it. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But they shouldn't do it as uninformed as we graduate high schoolers in the United States on personal finance, because it is creating and is going to create a crisis of that 2008 recession, I believe, because you look at they have the slabs, the student loan asset-backed securities, which is exactly like the mortgage loan, like the mortgage crisis, where they had the tranches and they were all rated AAA. Did you know that?
So they're bundling those student loans and then selling those off.
Oh yeah.
And that's and that's privately, because federally is obviously separate, but the private ones are.
Yep. There's an entire securities market built on that. And the thing is, with the housing crisis, at least the mortgages, there was an asset to be seized, right? There was a house. Even if it was a worthless house, it was at least a house that the bank could sell, that could seize. There's nothing backing these loans but labor. That's it. It's the labor of the people who took them out. So it's backed by nothing. There's nothing to seize except for the labor of the people, the earnings of the people who took the loans out. That's why you see people paying like way over market value when they sell these loans, because you'll see like Discover will sell like a bundle of loans, and people will pay like billions of dollars more than they're worth, because they know, because the loans are bankruptcy exempt because of the Higher Education Act, that they can hunt those people to the ends of the earth, and they're going to have to pay it. Like, it's crazy, and nobody sees it.
I mean, I did not know that. That is, yes, you are correct. That is worse than housing, because with the house, they were just, oh, let's foreclose. We're going to take it. It's going to ruin their lives. But like you said, they can now, because can you garnish wages for student loans to a certain extent, or is that less likely?
No, you can. That's the plan. That's why when you see people on TikTok that are talking about I saw recently, and I was talking to Ryan about this the other day, but I saw this video of a girl. One, I saw a bunch of videos when people were like, oh, I just haven't been paying them. And I just went, these people are going to cause an entire collapse of our economy because they're not paying the loans. And then people are like, oh, joke's on them. Like, what if we just didn't pay them? I'm like, that's quite literally the reason that you're in so much trouble. It's because you can't pay them. That's the reason. And so your only way of paying them back is they're going to garnish their wages. They're just going to take it from them. That's the only option.
And what's up with the interest rates where I'm seeing stories where, they had 50K of loans for 6 years, they made $800 payments or something crazy, and now they still owe $47,000. Like, what is
Okay.
happening with those loans that you're not even making progress?
So I think it's a combination of things. And it's funny, again, Ryan and I were just sitting around the other night talking about this, and I told him something. So he grew up in a family that was a lot more financially literate than mine. I did not grow up with any financial literacy other than Dave Ramsey. Like, debt is bad. That's it. Which is not a bad principle, because
Yeah.
I didn't have any, which is good, right? I had a car loan at one point for, I think, like $7,000. That was like the most debt I was ever in as a young adult. But I do not think, and this is my hot take, I was not financially literate enough. Like, I shouldn't have been allowed to take out those loans because I had no idea. Like, I'm so glad I didn't. I'm so glad I took out no loans because I did not understand the interest rates. I didn't understand how they worked. I didn't understand when they kicked in. Like, the terms of those loans is so confusing, and it's intentionally confusing. It's on purpose. It's just like healthcare in that they're going to hide behind, it's just like taxes, they're going to hide behind legalese so that people don't realize what they're signing. And you're signing in a way, sometimes these people are literally 17 years old. I had Bradley on a budget, which you might have seen his content. Like, he came on my podcast. He came on my podcast and told a story, and like, it could just like break my heart hearing the story, because I interviewed two people right back to back. I interviewed Bradley, and then I interviewed a young man who was degree free and who had not been pressured into college. And Bradley, when he turned 21 years old, because he actually graduated in 4 years, which is uncommon. Most graduates take 5.5, not 4. And he graduated culinary school. He had been told, if you want to get a job if you want to get a job as a pastry chef, you have to go to culinary school. You have to do this. All the adults in his life that he trusted told him to do this thing. He went in, his parents didn't understand the terms of the loans. He didn't understand the terms of the loans because he was 17 years old. And somebody was giving this to him. And then he said that they brought him in a week before he graduated college. I will never forget this. It like haunts me sometimes. I just hear it in my head. And he said that they brought him in and they told him how much his student loan payment was going to be. And he said he was sitting at his graduation a week later and he was just going, it would be better if I was dead. Like, he was so overwhelmed by the sheer number of the payment because he couldn't, how was he going to pay it? And there's a 6 month
Yeah.
grace period sometimes after you graduate, but usually you're immediately having to pay that. That's why so many people go into master's degree programs, because they're scared of the loan payment, and then they just increase it. And then the PhD, you've seen these eternal students, it's because of fear. So they just sell them more because as long as you're still taking on the debt, you don't have to pay it.
So it'll just accumulate. So your graduation from college, your gift is a $1,400 a month payment with,
Mhm.
what's the average percentage? Anywhere from what, 5 to 10%?
Right now, I think the average is 8. It's 8.9, I think, or 8.09% average interest rate. There's different interest rates between the federal and the private loans, but it's that part of it too is I think that people take out so many because they'll take out
Yeah.
some and then they're all fragmented, and truthfully, like, and this is just irresponsibility, but also you're giving this massive thing to a bunch of children, and they're children. They don't know how to manage that. I would barely be able to keep track of that now. Another reason why I wouldn't take out, like, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I wouldn't take out a loan that I couldn't keep track of the payments or understand the terms for. But we do it for kids who we don't even let rent hotel rooms. It's kind of like they can't drink a beer, but we're going to give them $100,000 loan with a changing interest rate. That's crazy. It's completely unethical. Like, and the fact that
Yeah.
it's one way debt, there's no way for them to discharge it. They cannot. They can't do it.
And I think the dare I use the word criminal part of it to me is that everyone seems to be okay without having the education in high school
Yeah.
to prepare young adults, even when it comes to taxes. And you probably know this as a business owner. I didn't know any of this stuff. When I became self-employed, you have to pay the
Yeah.
15.3% payroll tax.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
go, well, what's payroll tax? I thought FICA. No, FICA's part of the payroll.
Nope.
Oh yeah. And guess what, Freddie? Because you didn't open an S Corp, which is just a bullshit piece of paper that's you to then pay yourself a distribution to legally avoid some of those payroll taxes, you get hit with the tax bill and you get penalties because you didn't pay quarterly.
Hmm.
Where was that
Yeah.
class when I was a junior or senior in high school? And then you just take the L in real life. Like these
So
college students, why aren't we taught?
Today's episode is sponsored by NFM Lending. If you are a first-time home buyer, if you are looking to refinance your current mortgage, or you want to buy a second home or investment property, you want to talk to a lender so you can get your financial ducks in a row and get yourself a great deal. I've been working with NFM Lending for nearly 2 years now. They're my go-to lender, and they are because they're so thorough. They educate you through the process, and it's just an absolute wonderful company. They operate in 49 states, so every state except New York. So if you live in any of the other states, you can contact NFM Lending and they can put a roadmap together and help you get into the home of your dreams, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. My recommendation that I've been doing on TikTok that I share with everybody is if you're looking to buy a home in the next 6 to 12 months, I would recommend talking to them today, this week, this month, so you can put a plan together. You can talk about your debt to income. You can talk about your credit score. You can talk about rate buy downs. You can talk about VA loans. You can talk about conventional loans, but really get the education in a 15 to 30 minute conversation so you can put a roadmap together. So when you're ready to buy that home in 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months, you've made the right financial decisions leading up to buying that house. So you can go to nfmlending.com/Freddie Smith. You can fill out the questionnaire. They will get in contact with you and you can put a roadmap together. So again, that's nfmlending.com/Freddie Smith, and they will help you out. Now back to the show.
what high schools are optimizing for a lot of the time, the way that they measure success metrics is what?
Test?
College admission rates. How is that a success metric? It's all you're telling me is how many kids you managed to get into student loan debt. How is that success? That's not success. That's not. But it's a cultural, right? So now we've got these warped incentives, warped economic incentives have made warped cultural results. That's what happened. So now our whole culture is like, oh, everybody, like the more people we get into college, the better. But it's like that's not true. What you're looking for is the more people end up in jobs that meet their needs, the better. That's what you're looking for. That's what you should be measuring. It's, did they get something that, like, hey, they wanted to stay in their hometown, they were able to do that. Hey, they wanted to make 70K, they were able to do that. Hey, they wanted to get off at 2 p.m. Like, they were able to do that. But that's difficult. And so instead, we optimize for the thing that the system is trying to do, which is sell student loans.
That's what it seems to be very apparent. Like everything boils down to this money-making machine. And it kind of makes sense when you see the result of where we're living, that the middle class has died. And you can pull it back 40 years. And I can literally show you every economic policy that was good intention that literally failed in the past 5 years. And everything's getting more expensive. So I have, when you brought that up, though, about asking the right question, that's probably one of my favorite illustrations that you've done with the Jenga blocks. I go, how brilliant, because again, I keep thinking back to when I was in high school. No one ever sat out Jenga blocks and said, hey, Freddie, here's a way you should look at it. And I just had a gut feeling, thank God, that I was just like, I can't do this. Like, I got good grades in school because my parents kind of made me, like, I'll have no curfew if I get straight A's. So I did that. But I knew I hated school, was never going to go to college. But I was never being asked the right questions either. I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a living, but no one, that's all they ever asked me. What do you want to do? And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like, what are your 4 questions? I think it's 4 on the Jenga blocks. What are the questions that are actually equally, or if not more important to what do you want to do?
They're going to be backwards in the camera, but these are the Jenga blocks that Freddie's talking about. I have these really ugly Jenga blocks that I drew on a Sharpie with. And basically, there are 4 key factors that influence your satisfaction with your work. And this is the simplest way. It's so funny how simple this is going to sound, but it's taken quite literally a decade to boil this concept down to 4 Jenga blocks. And so they're the 4 things that are going to influence your job satisfaction, your life satisfaction. This is especially true for parents that are trying to have these conversations with their kids. But even if you're an adult and you're trying to move your life around, this is what you need to do, because it's very unlikely you were taught to be this strategic about your work. And people will be shocked when they figure out how much simpler and less intimidating it becomes to look for what they need and find educational options that suit them, so that then they can find career options that suit them as a result of this. But there's 4, and you can rearrange them in order of priority to you, because everybody has a different set of needs. Everybody, like based on ability, based on disability, based on, just like what you want out of your life, based out of the things that motivate you. And so it's going to be work environment, and that means, like, this is not job type. This is not job title. It's like, oh, I want to be a nurse. Like, no. Work environment is, I want to be be inside. I want to be outside. I want to work with people. I want to do solitary work that's self-paced. I want to be able to work from home some days and in an office other days. I want to go to the same 9 to 5, 5 days a week because I like it and it's calm and I like the routine, because everybody has different feelings about work environment. I don't want to work under fluorescent lights. That's a great example of work environment, right? Like, fantastic. The next one is going to be location. Where do you want to live and do life? Because if you are unable to live where you want to live, it will make you unhappy. In the same way, if you have to go into a work environment you hate, it will make you unhappy. How much money do you need to make to live the way you want? This question is different for literally every single person on the face of the earth. And like, you'll have somebody who has, a paid off mobile home on some land. And so their living expenses are really low. They don't have to work a full-time job if they don't want to. They are time rich. Like, that's one of the things that, and so now they don't have to make as much money as other people because they're fine. They're chilling. They're happy with their life. And then there's other people who are like, hey, I'm going to buy a 4-bedroom house on the beach in my family's hometown that's now super expensive. So I need to make a lot of money in order to stay where my family is because my location is important to me, right? You see, all these things are all connected. And then the last thing is schedule. If you have to work when you don't want to work, you're going to be miserable. If somebody made me work night shifts, I would be miserable. I can't do that. I don't want to do it. Like, I'm just not that kind of person. Some people want to do that. Some people want to work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Some people want to work 6 months at sea and then come home. Some people want to work 4 days every single day of the week. Some people are like that. And so these 4 things will influence your satisfaction: your work environment, your location, your income, and your schedule. And then you just reorder them in terms of importance to you. And then you figure out what jobs fit that. And then you figure out what those jobs actually require: licenses, certifications, hardware, software, and then specific skills.
It's just brilliant. It's so simple and so
it's so
brilliant.
Simple.
And that there's even a piece that I'm working on where I even talk about, I go, what is this going to cost you if you end up going there for 5.5 years? What's the total? What's the monthly? What is the starting pay? Call around. Yep. Where are you going to live? Go to Zillow. Mm-hmm. Where can you rent? Do the math. Are you going to have 401k taken out? What is it going to be after taxes? And then when you pay your $612 student loan, you're left with $2,300. Is $2,300 enough to start your life at 24 years old? And that's where I'm driven, where I just go, this drives me crazy. Because I've even ran the math. If people just get a job doing anything,
yes,
and start putting $500 away instead of in a student loan and an overpriced car, just $500 a month away into an index fund, that will make you a few $1,000,000 by the time you're 70. The janitor wins every time. The what?
The janitor wins every time.
And probably why. They start when they're maybe young, they have work experience, they just work it, they put the money away, they build. So there's just many options. And I think that's a good question to go into. What are some of the conversations you're having with kids, or that parents should be talking with their kids when it comes to, because when I think off the top of my head, if I could go back and I wasn't going to do anything creative, nothing entrepreneurial, I would just say, well, I can be a teacher, I can be a veterinarian, a pharmacist. Ooh. Love pharmacist. Wouldn't want to do that though. I would probably, because I know myself now, which I maybe didn't at 17, would look into trades because I like working outside, working with my hands. Mm-hmm. So I'm either going to be a plumber, a teacher, or a veterinarian. And now I have to pick. Like, that's how it kind of feels sometimes. And you're saying that there are obviously more options. I'm being a little sarcastic, but you know what I mean? Like, how do you pinpoint all these jobs that no one talks about?
Oh, this is the question. And this is the one that nobody likes the answer to. The answer is it just takes hours. It just takes hours of searching. And I know that because we do this as a service, because it's so crazy. It's so crazy. And basically, the big barrier to doing this right now is that there's no centralized database. The best, most up-to-date register of all of the job titles that's actively updated is the internet. And so you just have to know what you're looking for in the wilds of the internet, which seems super intimidating, but it's so worth the month that a parent may spend doing this with their kid, because it could save them so much pain if they just start with the strategy. And so the big thing is, instead of starting from job type, right, which that one's tough because you basically have to isolate which of those blocks is the most important. And so then objectively going into, okay, my child wants to make 60K. All right. So we're going to go, let's just say 60K, right? So they want to go make 60K. All right. Well, now we're looking for jobs that pay 60K. And then the tough thing that parents parents have to do and young adults have to do as well is they have to avoid those listicles that are like, here are jobs that don't require a degree that make over $100,000, because every single time, without fail, it will tell you the trades every single time. Like I just saw an article, the other day that said like, here are the top 10 jobs in California that don't require a college degree. And I wanted to make my own spoof list where the top one was like CEO of Meta, because like, you know what I mean? Like, can we not do this? Like, can we not do this? Because the richest people in California, like some of the richest people in California they don't have college degrees. They're business owners, they're entrepreneurs. Like it's just a ridiculous. And all of them have different skill sets, right? They have like software developer, they have, they have designer, they have entertainer, they have all these different, professions. But the thing is that people need to really focus on is they need to focus on being objective, because when you see a job listing that'll come back and tell you, okay, well, UX UI designers make 60K, they make more than that, but a UX UI designer, which is and then going, what is that? Because what a lot of people will do is when they see a job title they don't recognize, they just ignore it. But you have to go look and see, like, what is that? And then you have to go check and see, does this legally require a college degree? Because if the answer is no, your kid can get it. You just have to figure out what they need to learn in order to do that. And when you approach work that way, it's so funny. The people that naysay that just say, oh, well, you don't know, like all the jobs require degrees. I'm like, you don't know that. You've never tried to get one without it. You don't know that. You're not right. Like, you are not right. The market data does not support that. 14.5% of the jobs on ZipRecruiter even say college degree preferred. 14.5%. On Indeed, it's 17.5% that even say preferred. It's less than 1 in 5. So people are like, most jobs require no, not even close. Like, not even close. And only 7.7. There's only been a 0.3% increase since 1965 in job titles that require a college degree.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like nothing. It's a joke. It's like impossible to run into that requirement unless you were trying to cut somebody's head open. Unless you're trying to be a surgeon, unless you're trying to cut people open, it's very difficult to run into this requirement outside of like medical licensure requirements.
Exactly. No, and
CPAs.
I think
CPAs are removing the master's degree requirement actually right now. That'll probably going to happen any day now.
What is?
CPAs. There's a massive down credentialing across all of these fields. I think a lot of it's due to AI, because that's my background. Is I come from the AI machine learning like space, and basically like it's software, like enterprise level software and training it. But the thing that I see downstream, a lot of people are like, oh, AI is going to take all these jobs, blah, 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 blah. Like, no. The first thing that AI is going to do is it's going to remove unnecessary degree requirements, because there will be no defensibility in those things. So I think the bar is actually the next one that's going to be at risk, because reading the law before the formation of the American Bar Association, people could read the law. There's absolutely no reason why I can't study for and take the bar. Zero. Like, I should be able to do that. There's no actual reason to require lawyers to go to law school in order to take the bar. There shouldn't be a degree requirement for that. You can be a judge without having a college degree in a lot of places. I don't know if you knew that, but you can, because it's an elected position. So like,
That's
yeah.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah, but the CPAs are a great example where the master's, the thing that, and I saw this coming, but I just said it's going to get to the point where you're going to see actuaries. Actuaries don't require college degrees. You can get a fellowship to become an actuary. And then take your exams. And CPAs were the next one on the chopping block, because they have this 150-hour requirement to take the CPA exam on top of a bachelor's degree. But why?
Yeah, right. Why can't you just if
the exam is the gate, right?
So it's 150 hours of where you have to study and pass. Is it like a state exam, kind of like getting a real estate license kind of deal?
It is kind of like that, yeah. So you basically have to get a bachelor's degree, and then you have to take 150 hours of advanced classes in order to qualify to sit for the CPA exam. But that 150-hour requirement that's basically a master's degree is getting cut, because it doesn't make any sense. Why? Why do they need that? And the next step is going to be, why do they need a bachelor's degree? Because you can study accounting principles and have experience as a bookkeeper and then attempt the CPA exam. And if you can pass it, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to be a CPA.
I mean, that's probably the most simple, like no disrespect to CPAs, because we don't know what obviously goes into it, but you can imagine if there was just a program to learn how to CPA, even if it's 2 years on your own time, or check in with a mentor and pass a class. Because even with real estate agents, that's what they do. I know that's different, but you have to pass this preliminary class.
No, it's
then
very
you
similar.
have to take a state exam, and then you get your license. It's like, imagine if they required a bachelor's degree And to be honest, you still don't even really learn that much in the prerequisite courses, like you learn in the field.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just makes a lot more sense to just go like be more efficient. I think most jobs, if you were to put me at 18 years old in any job, not any, but most, with a mentor, and I just followed them around and asked them questions and they taught me, I could probably have been fine and ready to go in 2 years.
We have a family friend who is he's top of his field in oncology, and he essentially said the same thing. He said if I were to take my son and I had him for 2 years, I could teach him to be exactly at the level that I am at in 2 years. No medical school, no nothing.
It just makes sense. That's how we do everything in life. And then now
Mhm.
with even Chat GPT, which ties into the CPA conversation, I don't even know. Do you recommend that people even still go to college to be a CPA? I feel like a CPA is going to be one of the first ones to go because even with my taxes this year, I went on ChatGPT. I took my wife's W-2, my self-employment, our 401k, our write-offs, and I wrote everything into ChatGPT and said, what are we going to owe?
Yeah.
And it just broke everything down, standard deductions. And then it even suggested, like, should we do it jointly or should we do it separate as a married couple? And I'm so curious because our accountant's almost done if the amount is going to be close. And it's like, what are
So
they doing at that point if AI can do it in 10 seconds?
I think that the future is actually looks more like have you seen Little House on the Prairie before? You know that really old like TV TV
I've
land
heard
like
of it, but I've never
reruns.
seen like the whole, yeah.
So there is a something that's going on. It's very interesting, but it's kind of feeds into entrepreneurial, like it just feeds into entrepreneurship. It feeds into states that are doing things a little bit more efficiently to again satisfy like market need. And so in Texas, where we are, there are a lot of physicians that are direct primary care physicians, and they basically what they do is you pay them cash like you would a subscription, like a Spotify subscription, but it's for a doctor. And
Yeah.
then they have a max of patients that they can have, and they run these really like small little practices. It's a lot less than you would pay for health insurance. So a lot of business owners actually take advantage of it because it's a lot more accessible than healthcare because you go pay insurance and then you go to the hospital and they're going to charge you 18 times as much as they would pay this family doctor. And so I actually think that the human aspect, because medicine is one of those like diagnostics specifically and basic diagnostics is very much threatened by AI, but I think it's actually just going to help because people are going to need human advice and guidance supplemented by those things. So more people will have more complex questions earlier on because they're going to use technology. So it's kind of like what happened with it reminds me a lot of what happened with the bank tellers. And so when the ATM was invented, everybody lost their minds. It was like, oh my God, all of the bank tellers are going to go out of it. Like they're all going to be unemployed. We're going to have mass unemployment of bank tellers. That's not what happened. More banks opened up and there were actually more bank teller positions as a result of the ATMs. It created multitudes of jobs in order to support all these growing locations because the ATMs increased the accessibility of banking, which means that more people started banking. And because of that, it increased the amount of people that needed to be hired in order to support that. And so people, whenever there's these big technological leaps, they always panic. They're always like, oh my God, everybody should go on UBI because we're all going to be unemployed. And I'm like, no, that's probably not what's going to happen. What's probably going to happen is there's going to be way more jobs. There's going to be more business. There's going to be more stuff. So everything will grow and then it will condense decades later. So parents who are panicking right now, trying to worry about all that stuff, what's going to happen before AI replaces CPAs is there's going to be a lot more need for CPAs because more people will use them, I think. And so if anything, I think that they're going to remove the bachelor's degree requirement on the CPA exam because there's no need for it. Because why can't I study GAAP principles and get 2 years of accounting experience and then take the exam? If the exam is the gate, why do I have to pay a college to take the exam?
I mean,
Same thing with the bar. If the bar is the gate, why do I have to pay a college to take the bar?
yeah, if you
There's no
can
good
pass
reason.
the test, it makes sense. You know what's super strange? When you mentioned the doctor taking monthly subscriptions or however it
Hmm.
was, I almost made a video on that a couple months ago because I was running the numbers in my head. And I go, if they had, I don't remember the numbers now because I never made the video, but that's such a good point that if a primary care physician had maybe 1,000 people on $100 a month subscription where they could just call and go see him, he'd probably be laid back, texting, send me pictures, come and see me, no rushing, and would probably make more money than what they're doing in this old model. Like everything needs
I
updated, and it drives me
I call it
nuts.
Back to the Future, is where everything goes back to. So the reason I said Little House on the Prairie is because on that show, a very prominent character is Dr. Baker, and he's like the village doctor. And quite literally, everybody just goes to him and they just pay him cash. But everybody gets care when they need care. Again, because just economics by itself will account for the fact that people will be able to get care. When I saw this, I wish I had saved this TikTok, but I saw this girl who her grandmother had been a physician, and her grandmother had been a physician in like, I don't know, it was like the late 60s, early 70s. The practice was built underneath their house. So her office was on the ground floor and then or in the basement, and then the house was upstairs, and she just went through because it was like her grandmother had passed away, and so it was all her, like she had a doctor's office and she ran a practice out of there. She hired a receptionist. She was a stay-at-home mom. She had 6 kids. She raised 6 children and was able to be a physician and run a home-based business that catered to her neighborhood. I'm like, I can't think of a cooler thing. If that had been an option, I would have been a doctor. I would have gone to medical school. I would have tried to do that because that would have been a one, like that's so cool. And I see this beautiful future where these things just they go back to the way they were in a way where yes, you don't have to go work for this big corporation. You're not a slave to your literally millions of dollars by the time but $1 million by the time all is said and done for your student loan debt. Because the physicians, oh my gosh, you want to talk about the compound and you want to talk about the interest on the student loans for doctors, it's criminal. It's criminal. And part of that, Freddie, is because we started requiring them to go get bachelor's degrees. Why? Why can't they just go to medical school? Why can't they take the MCAT and go to medical school if they can pass it? Why do we make them do that? Right? Like we
So that
tacked
would
on
save
another
them
4
4
to
or 5
5
years.
years. Yes, which is huge. I can see the math in your head. I can
Yeah.
see the math in your head because for them, it's the prime earning years. And honestly, for a lot of female physicians, it's the time where they are now not able to have kids if they want to. Like they have to choose between a family and that's not good. Like that's not a good thing. They have to choose between a family and their ability to have a career, and that's terrible. Whereas this woman was able to do both of those things. Like the girl told a story about her grandmother being able to go upstairs and stir like food on the stove and then come back down to see patients. I'm like, what a cool, like how amazing. And you would never see that now, but it's starting to come back around where in Texas, I've seen that. That's very similar to that where, yeah, laid back, texting, serving, like, but also way more concerned with their patients because they're more accountable to their patients because you can call them or text them and they have to actually see you and look you in the eyes, you know?
It just seems breaking down this like constraint and structure and regulation and this corporate. It warms my heart to think back in the day how people just seem to have a lot more freedom to just do, just to work hard and not have, like, I feel like I'm part of a system now. And as much as I'm trying to break free, just when I get through a layer, you're hit with another one. You're like, I didn't know this shit existed. Now I got to get through this. And then now, and you're constantly, going through that. But I do have faith that we are going, like all of us are coming together. Thank God for TikTok, the internet, because we can consume massive amounts of information and hear people like yourself that are like, you're not crazy. There are other ways. Before I let you go, and I want to thank you for your time, is there advice that we can give, twofold here to end, is for those who do have to go to college, even though we just showed maybe there's other paths, but if you do have to go, do you give any advice on how for it not to be $100,000? Like, is there a way to hack it where you can get a bachelor's or master's that doesn't make you broke, and maybe even in some instances pull the old school trick of working in the summer and paying a lot of it off so your loan isn't as big? Like, is that anywhere possible without rich parents or a scholarship?
Yeah, so there's basically 2 strategies here. One you use on the front end right after they graduate, which I don't advise because it's risky, because it's really unlikely that whatever they're going to do right then is going to be actually necessary, because they're just not really going to be totally sure that that's what they want to do. You're going to get your rare outliers where that's the case, but most parents want to believe that that's their kids when it's really not. But the best advice I could give people is to wait. Wait until they're older. Wait until, especially for parents, wait until that FAFSA is just them. Because if they did, the parents could still pay for the entire thing if they wanted to. Like middle class people could afford to pay their kids college if they waited until their kids were 25 to pay it, and that's the hardest thing to do. But that is the best way to avoid going into massive student loan debt. But if you are determined for your child to go right out of high school, one, like I said, measure those blocks out, make sure that you have the right order of priorities and that your child understands that, hey, like if you choose this now, these are going to be the trade-offs. Like, hey, this job is going to keep you from having this type of schedule, or it's going to allow you to live in this location, but you won't be able to make this type of money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the biggest thing is what you said was right about the cost, the monthly cost. That really helps. But another thing that helps is to tell them how long they're going to be paying it. Tell them how old they're going to be when they pay that off. That's a huge thing. I would advise parents to do. But then what you do is look for anything that can make them more marketable and make sure that they get a job. Because the thing is, and we didn't even get into this, but a lot of companies are actually avoiding hiring college graduates right now. Like 71% of employers on a recent intelligent.com survey admitted that they're not hiring Gen Z college graduates because they just have a mismatch of salary expectations and then work ethic. So that's not good. And so in order to overcome that bias, parents need to make sure that, like, if your child's going to school for computer science, they need to have a really killer GitHub. They need to have cybersecurity certifications. They need to have whatever certs that they're looking for in the industry. So basically, do not rely on the degree to be the thing that gets your child hired. That'd be the biggest thing. And then look for the most expedient path. So obviously, don't send them out of state. That's a huge one. Like the name that if your college is not one word, like if it's not a one word college, then it's definitely 100,000% not worth it to send them out of state. Like like
Yeah.
there's no reconcilable way for that to be a thing. So a lot of people will send but anyway, and then I would say make sure you do national research, because I've actually seen like hybrid programs, especially for medical stuff, where like South Dakota has a medical, what I'll call educational tourism. Well, they'll have like a 13-month RN program that's hybrid. So you go up to South Dakota for a couple weeks and you do your clinical stuff, and then you come back and you study online. And those tend to be a lot more affordable and a lot faster than a RN program that you go through at a state college or anything like that. And so looking for other options. So if you are going to send them out of state, it's because there's a very clear return. Like, okay, this is going to shrink their education down to 1 year. And really what parents should be shooting for is like 1 year, 2 years max. And don't fall into the trade trap. That's the other thing. A lot of people now are like, oh, just go into the trades. Don't do that unless it matches the blocks. Otherwise, they're going to be unhappy too. And trade school debt is still student loan debt. That's the biggest thing I want to say.
Okay, so there is, and do you feel, not just one other quick thing I forgot to ask you during earlier? Do you feel this is the only thing I can come to conclusion when you were saying that we kind of expect children at 18 to go to college, and parents are kind of, when you ask why, they're like, oh, it's just what we do. Do you think there's a fear on the parents' end that if they just let them go out into the world, that they won't have any guidance per se, and then they won't have any backup plan, and then by the time they're 25, they might never go to college, and then they have a fear of this old mindset of how will they succeed? And then do you also think the children, as I'm trying to work this out, might have had structure their whole life, and then going into college and getting out of the house might be a transition period, rather than, so at 18, I'm just going to grab a suitcase and go knock on factory doors and restaurants and say, hey, I'm fresh out of high school. And that maybe is it nerves because we're not really prepared for what to do? Do you see that a lot, or am I overthinking that? I'm just trying to figure out the psychology behind it so that can be shifted. So people, because I think what you said today, sorry, but the thing you said about waiting till 25 just seems like the perfect answer. Huh?
Yeah, but people are going to go, oh my gosh, they're going to be behind. But I'm like, if they're not in bankruptcy exempt debt and having to go back to school later, they're not behind. They're ahead. All you have to do to put your child ahead of half of the population of the United States is not put them in student loan debt. Literally just don't buy a college degree. They're ahead of half the population already, immediately. That's all you have to do. Just keep them out of debt. That's it. That's literally the recipe. Make sure they graduate high school, keep them out of debt. Boom. Two of the biggest advantages you give them in life.
I mean, I feel you. And also, we need to keep speaking up. Like, I'm going to be 37 years old tomorrow, actually. And I'm officially into officially into my late 30s, leaving the mid 30s. But I still feel the same as 19. Yeah. I'm just wiser. And I think it's okay if you are 25 or even 30, even if I wanted to go to college right now and be done at 42, I have another 30 years that I could go and do something I love. Like, there's no timeline.
I
Let people
saw
be
this.
who they want to be, and not to be afraid of waiting, I think, is the best message. Because I don't think people would make mistakes at 25. You would see way
Far
more
less.
great decisions being made about college and the appreciation of money, because you've lived in the real world for 7 years and you understand the rent,
And you
you
don't spend
understand the
money like an
bills.
idiot, honestly. And I say that as having been one of those idiots. Like, I didn't understand I didn't understand what the value of a dollar was. And especially when you're borrowing money, because you're borrowing money from your future self when you take on student loans, and you have no concept of what you're going to have to do to pay it off. You have no concept of labor. You have no concept of like the cost of those things to you. And what I mean is the cost of the hour you're going to spend to make that money back. And what parents really, what really needs to be taken off the backs of parents is that you have failed. If your child does not immediately go into college, no, you have succeeded, because everybody is slowly, this is happening. Like, half of Gen Z is going, this is not worth it. This is not worth it. And they're right. They're absolutely right. And the parents now, something like it's almost like 70% of parents now are just like, this is not a good idea. And it's not. That's because it's not a good idea. And when we take that pressure off and we start to examine those incentives, and we just go, wait a minute, college is a business. They're hedge funds. They're
Yeah.
always going to take your money. They're always going to take your kids' bankruptcy exempt debt money. They're not going anywhere. Your child will make the right, if they're going to buy a degree, they're going to make the right decision when they're older. I interviewed a young man on my podcast who's a financial real estate analyst for a Fortune 50 company, huge company, degree free. They hired him when he was 20, and they're going to pay for him to go through the CPA program, but he's probably not going to get it and be done until he's 25. But that's a great example of where there is, like, he is going to go get a degree because he needs it, and the company he's working for is going to pay for it. So your kid's like, okay, you know what, they're interested in, like, they're interested in R&D. Okay, well, go find them a job on a like biochemical manufacturing floor. And I'm telling you right now, not only will they be financially better off, they're going to have a more relevant resume. They're going to be a lot more compelling as a hire. And then if they do well, which they will if they just show up to work, a lot of times you'll find companies will pay for them to get degrees if they need them. And then they will guarantee them a promotion and a raise when they do that. That is how you de-risk the whole situation. Like, that's it. And that is wait. Wait is the key word. It's also the one that nobody wants to hear, because they just feel it feels productive to just shove your kid into a college, but like it's actually not. It's counterproductive. And so that is a tough thing to hear, but that's the one that parents need to hear, I think. It's just wait.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, and even for myself, I think seeing how that monthly payment affects you when trying to get a mortgage, even the psychological aspect of going, well, I'm 80K in debt. What's another 6,000 on a credit card? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I got 300 left over at the end of the month. Do I want to go to this concert or put my $300 on the $80,000 debt? And I think that's creating bad habits because people feel like they're drowning, which leads me into this next question. I think we've made really good points of like, hey, maybe reconsider, parents, if you haven't gone to college. But what about the folks, the millions of millennials and Gen Zers who do have 50, 80, $100,000 of debt? What advice can we give to those individuals other than bust your ass, work 2 jobs, try to pay it off as soon as possible? I mean, what advice can you give without it seeming like such a unbelievable commitment? I mean, that's basically a mortgage from 20 years ago that they have to pay off for that piece of paper.
It is, and I can only really imagine. I really can only imagine how tough it is. I do have, and even though I talk a lot on TikTok, like you see my tone on TikTok, which a lot of times I'm arguing with people who are just the mindset's just not salvageable, and I'm just going, this is absolutely crazy. But I do have, and I have on occasion, like, again, only Ryan really sees this, but I've like seen stories of people that made me cry. Like Bradley broke my heart that he was unable to take an entry level job as a pastry chef that was what he wanted to do because of his student loans. He quite literally was not able to do the job that he wanted to do because he had gotten a degree to do the job he wanted to do. Horrible, heartbreaking. And it made him resent the thing that he had loved, the thing that he went to go do because his grandmother had done it and he had seen it with so much love and he wanted to do that. Like, horrible. I hate that for people. Like, it breaks my heart. But the thing that people really need to do, and I think that this is so key, like, is to get that debt off their backs. They really do. They're going to feel so much better. And unfortunately, not work 2 jobs. But what they can't do is they can't be tied to low paying work if that is the reason they can't pay off their loans. If you have a teaching degree and that's the reason, and you're a teacher and you cannot pay off your loans because you're a teacher, you have to leave. You have to leave. If you don't want to live the rest of your life that way, you have to get that off your back. And unfortunately, the best way to do that, the highest leverage way to get out of that is sales jobs. Go into sales jobs and learn how to do that. And I know that that's like, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. But sales is going to help them in 2 different ways. One, it's the quickest way to make better income because 6 months, it's going to be super rough for 6 months, but like finding finding a job with a low base pay and a salary, learn how to sell because it will help you understand negotiation. It will help you understand business. It will help you understand all of these things that will then help you to negotiate a higher salary in your next job. Most of us have very few opportunities to negotiate, but get out of capped industries. Like, I see people, trying to fight the uphill battle with their biology degrees, for $40,000 STEM jobs or $39,000 a year STEM jobs or $40,000 a year social work jobs. And they're like, well, I'm just never going to be able to get out of this. And I'm like, you will, but you can't work in the industry that you bought the degree in. Like, you guaranteed that when you bought the degree, which is such hard advice to give. Like, that sucks so much. Like, I hate that for people. But I don't want to see them live the rest of their lives in a box of degree debt that they created when they were 17. And unfortunately, now the thing they have to do is really hard. They have to go back to the beginning, stack their blocks, figure out what matters. And for a lot of them, they're going to have to prioritize income so that for a temporary period of time, pay off the loans, do whatever you have to do to pay those loans off, because your life on the other side, you'll feel like you could start a business if you want to. You'll feel like you can go travel, and hitchhike around if you want to. Like, you'll feel like you can become a professional dog walker. Like, you'll feel it, and you're not gonna have to work 18 jobs, for the rest of your life, feeling all this stress and like trying to build a family and trying to buy a house and try to afford all these. Like, just wipe the slate clean and just be okay. Just reconcile to the fact that your past choices, you were spending future use money. That's you right now, and you have to fix it. You have to fix it so that you feel okay, so you don't wake up every single day under that dark cloud, like feeling that pressure and that stress, and knowing like there's a dark monster behind you with this huge number that every single day goes up. Like, just kill it, just slay it.
Yeah.
Like, and that's so hard. That's really easy for me to say because I don't have to do it, but the people who I've seen do that and put that in practice, they feel so much better on the other end. It's like losing weight, like it's like getting fit, it's like getting healthy. And that's really what it is financial health again. But you have to make money to do that.
That's why I love your transparency of just getting people to look at other options, to wait, and to understand that life without debt is the freest life you'll have. And that's what we need as our generation. So I just really appreciate the work that you're doing. I literally look forward to seeing your videos all the time. I'm so excited about the success of your book. Where can people, obviously you can, find Degree Free on all social media, but where is the best place for someone to find your book?
Yeah, so the book is actually degreefree.com/book, and that's the Degree Free Way workbook set, which comes with 2 books, one for a parent, one for a young adult. And to date, since the release of the book last year, we sold almost 12,000 sets nationwide, which is pretty crazy if you think about it, for just TikTok authors. Like, it's pretty, because you saw us, like, we wrote and built that book on TikTok. That was like a TikTok source. People had asked for something, and that was what we designed, and that was what came out of it. And it's really good for parents who are trying to figure out, like, how do I find what my child needs? Like, those 4, because really what it is a tool to help you figure out what those 4 blocks are. Because once you have those 4 blocks, you can find anything, and you are still going to have to do the back end work because you're just going to have to do the research so you don't miss something. Because regionally, based on budget, based on interests, you're going to get all kinds of different options, but you have to know what you're looking for in order to find it. And that's what the book set does, is helps you find 3 jobs that actually work for what your child needs in their life.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, for any parents out there, anyone who wants more education on it, you can go check that out. I absolutely, again, love what you're doing. I appreciate your time, and I think I only got to maybe 6 questions, so we'll have to do this again in the future because I have so much more
Down.
to talk to you about. But I want to thank you for your time. Keep crushing it, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.